Have you had launching a podcast on your wish list this year? Yes? Okay. Have you launched it? Like, are you where you want to be? No? You cannot let another month go by without making progress. What if I told you there was a way to have your entire podcast launched in 1 week? There is with the podcast VIP week. There's no better time than the present because it's summer. And I know you have some big launches planned for the fall. What if you could use that podcast you've been wanting to launch to support you with that launch this fall? Right? Let's get your podcast launched, start building up your subscriber base, those raving fans, and prime them to buy in the fall. But before I jump in, I'm your host, Karalee, an operations specialist for online coaches and service providers. And of course, today we are discussing the 3 most common hurdles stopping you from launching your podcast and then also how to overcome them. All right, so let's dive in. The first hurdle is fear of not being good enough, which is also imposter syndrome. So I hear this one all the time, and I've experienced this one in full force when I first launched my podcast. So fear of not being good enough, which is imposter syndrome. So for one, you're not alone in this one. We've all been there. And as I record this, I'm thinking back to my first episode a year ago. I was so nervous. I thought no one would listen, and I didn't want to edit another anything with my voice in it. Okay. So some of the thoughts that entered my mind, and they might have entered yours, is who am I to have a podcast? Like, I'm no one. My voice sounds boring and annoying. Is my content actually worthy of listening to? There's already so many podcasts on this topic. Like, will anyone actually listen? I remember sitting there with a microphone in front of me, as I am right now, and my recording software is open, as it is right now, and my brain was blank, even with a script in front of me, which that part is not right now. So those thoughts had stopped me so many times. Someone out there is waiting to hear your perspective on your story. That's what I remember each time I get discouraged. That someone might be listening to this episode right now. If I had let this feeling of not being good enough stop me from launching this podcast, what would you think? Or think of your favorite podcast. How would it feel if they didn't have their podcast that you absolutely love listening to? I bet you they already had a similar fear of launching. Okay. So here's how we overcome this fear of launching is we just start small. And we might not even publish anything, but we practice, right? We make a plan, like what our episode's going to be on. What do I need? And we just do the thing. Okay. We do it in a closet. We do it, at your desk where no one else is around. Or if you're better with someone in the room, then do it with someone in the room as if you're talking to someone. And you also get that support system, whoever your biz besties are, or whoever is in your support system, right? You get them on board too. So when you launch this podcast, you have someone rooting for you. So focus on doing the thing and less on the perfection of the thing. So over the course of your podcasting journey, you'll end up learning and implementing new things as you go. Okay. But if we never start, we can never learn. And so we have to actually just put our foot forward, have that plan, get the support we need to move forward. Okay. So the second hurdle that might be stopping you from launching your podcast is the tech part. I hear this one all the time. I'm not techie, or tech overwhelms me. The technical aspects of starting a podcast can certainly be discouraging. There's getting the best equipment for sound quality and the best software for editing. And then where do we upload it? Then there's the actual steps of recording, editing it, uploading it itself. The learning curve can be quite intimidating. Let me tell you, as a person that does not actually struggle with tech too much, it was still intimidating to me. Okay. So personally, I'm the one a lot of people come to for tech challenges. So I've heard it all. It comes down to this. If you're open to learning and getting the right support, you'll overcome these specific tech challenges in no time. Okay. So tech does not need to stop you from launching your podcast. It gets to be another challenge you get to overcome and be proud of your progress in. Bottom line is to get support, to learn the tech curve and watch yourself soar. And I'm not even kidding. Once you have the tech piece underneath of you, which is honestly one of the biggest things that are stopping a lot of people from starting a podcast, is that there's just so many steps. So between the plan and getting the tech support that you need, you are well on your way, right? So, in the third hurdle of launching a podcast is the time commitment. Okay. We're going to talk about this a little bit more today. It takes what the time commitment that it takes to have a successful podcast is what we're talking about here. And we're just talking about getting the podcast to a space where your audience can listen to it. Okay. And we're not talking about promoting it and all these other things that come after, but we're talking about the planning, the recording, the editing, and then what we are actually going to do to promote it. But this can seem overwhelming when you think about it full circle. So especially when you already have a really, really busy schedule. Okay. We probably all do. If you're listening to this, that's why you love podcasts, because you can listen on the go, right? So, hey, if you like podcasts because you can listen on the go, think about it. Does your audience like to listen on the go? Right? So you have to be strategic, you have to be dedicated and willing to put in the time to have a podcast. Okay. There's time involved, even if you outsource the editing portion, which by the way, we can help you with that. Right. So there is still a time commitment, and I'm going to break down exactly what you might need to do in order to figure out what that time commitment could look like for your specific podcast. Okay. So some things to think about when you're trying to see what that might look like. Okay. How long will your episodes be? Right? Are they going to be kind of short, like my podcast, 15 to 30 minutes at most, right? Or are they going to be like an hour, more than an hour, right? It depends on what you and your audience wants, right? So the next question you want to ask yourself, how well do you record, right? Which means how much time is it going to take to edit your podcast? If you're really good at not editing or at recording it the first time, you're probably not going to need as much time in the editing process, depending on how you want it to sound. Or there's some people that literally are like, my audience wants to see me mess up if I mess up, so I'm not even going to have to edit it. We're just going to make sure that there's not any crazy loud crashes in the background, but we don't actually have to edit out the dialogue. All right. So currently my podcast only gets minimal editing. So the next question you want to ask yourself is, will you need to write a script, or are you going to wing it? Right? There are pros and cons to both of these, but think about it. Are you good at completing thoughts and making sure all the things are compiled really easily when you wing it? Or do you really need that script to make sure that you can get all of your points? There are seasons. There are seasons when I have scripts and there's seasons when I don't have scripts. So think about it. What would make sense for you and your message? Okay. And the last question I want you to ask yourself is, how are you going to promote your podcast? Okay. So we're talking, you're going to put it on a podcast platform, but like, what else are you going to do with it? Like repurposing it, or where are you going to be talking about it so people know it exists besides just in the podcast platform, right? So social media, emails, things like that. Okay. Break these things down, these 4 questions I asked, break these down into steps, and it'll be much simpler and you'll have a more accurate time commitment. But don't forget, you'll also have to test out your estimates a few times too. All right. Especially if you're not great at figuring out how long things take you, or if you've just never done it before and you're like, I don't know, test it out and see what happens. Okay. So we absolutely conquered these podcast launch hurdles today, didn't we? All right. Those are those 3. So we have, the first one was fear of not being good enough, which is imposter syndrome. There was the technical overwhelm. And then the third one was a time commitment. So we totally gave you some steps in order to be able to do that. So you're feeling a little more fired up about launching your podcast this summer, right? So let's do it together. All right. If you're not like, oh, I can do this all by myself, like, let's do it together. It's also more fun to do it together. A lot more inspiration, a lot more easy to actually like do the work. Right. So I want you to head to the show notes and I want you to book your podcast VIP week. All right. So spots are limited. So if you're interested, let's chat, because there's only a few spots open for the summer. And I want to make sure if you're interested that you get one of those spots. All right. So if you have any questions, absolutely let me know. And let me know if you have any other hurdles about launching your podcast. What is stopping you? You can head on over to Instagram and send me a DM and tell me what is stopping you from launching your podcast, or you can head to the show notes and send me a text too, and we can chat that way. But until next time, we're going to be talking all about podcasting for the next couple of weeks and really getting you launching your podcast and getting the support that you need. All right. Bye for now.